the new world of college football, ladies and gentlemen, where the Power Five no longer exists. A dozen teams will play over the course of a month for a national title. The NCAA continues to make up rules left and right that they can't even follow. And your transfer portal rankings are almost as influential as your recruiting ones. Now, nobody in the world of college football would ever say build your roster with 1-year rentals and proven commodities, but the addition of 1 or 2 transfers could be the reason why one program is making it to the college football playoff and another is sitting at home with an 8-4 record. But here's my question for you today. Who was the most influential transfer added to every program this offseason in the SEC? Maybe not the biggest name, maybe not the flashiest player, but the one that is going to be influential on the overall outcome for teams going into 2024. What's going on, SEC Unfiltered? It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling us your thoughts on who was the most influential transfer added this offseason. Make sure you hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. Follow my own YouTube channel at Mr. Cole Thompson. Make sure that you also download the SEC Unfiltered podcast wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Apple, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Make sure that you're following us on social media at SEC Unfiltered, Twitter, X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And to keep up with everything going on in the #1 conference in all of college athletics, make sure that you follow us at secunfiltered.com. So today, I figured we would go through my favorite moves added in via the portal for all 16 teams going into 2024. This includes Texas and Oklahoma. We got to throw them in here, even though they're not going to be a part of the conference until July 1st. But by next season, several of the names that were added in this offseason to Norman and Austin might be the reason we're either talking very positively about the Sooners or in a negative light about the Longhorns. Regardless, let's start off with Alabama. They bring in Parker Brailsford from Washington. This was a starter. This is a guy who has experience going up against quality competition. People seem to forget that the Pac-12 was riddled with top-notch talent this past year, whether it be at certain positions or just teams in general. And Parker Brailsford was a part of a Joe Moore-winning offensive line, taking reps at both center and right guard. Alabama's offensive line was a makeshift last year. It was definitely far from the expectations of what we know underneath Nick Saban. And the best way to make sure that you are funneling forward and keeping your quarterback upright is by having exceptional offensive line play. Having a guy that already understands the offensive personnel of what Kalen DeBoer wants to run, more importantly, already has starting experience, is an immediate plug and play, whether you put him at center, whether you put him at right guard, whether you put him at left guard. Let spring football unfold for a little bit, but you know for a fact that Brailsford is going to be in the fold for one of the starting spots. Arkansas, Taylon Green, Boise State quarterback. You need mobility. You had KJ Jefferson. It felt like at this point it was best for both sides to part ways, and now you're bringing in a 6'4" quarterback that has mobility beyond belief. He was the reason why down the stretch, Boise State started to gain a little bit of inertia, started to find their rhythm. And even though India Velas was fired, they ended up winning the Mountain West. Now he comes to the SEC. He's a big-bodied guy. He's got mobility out the wazoo, and he's got the physicality to be able to take on a few more hits after contact. He's got a good arm. You got to be able to see what he can do with the consistency factor, but you add in the dual threat element with a coach like Bobby Petrino, who's worked with a ton of quarterbacks, including Heisman Trophy winner Lamar Jackson. This feels like somewhat of a match made in heaven. Not saying that this will be the move that brings Arkansas to 9-3 or 10-2, but it may mitigate the waters to where you feel comfortable bringing back Sam Pittman in 2025, which ultimately is the end goal for all Hog fans, I think, right now, especially because of the demeanor that he carries. Auburn, I like Jerry Thompson from Texas. You need secondary help. You just lost almost your entire secondary to the NFL draft. And the expectations are building off of last season. You don't want to be 6-6 again. You want to be 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, fighting for a college football playoff spot. And so the best way to do so is by having a solidified secondary. Thompson was a 2-year starter at Texas. During his time with the Longhorns on the 40 acres, he had 5 interceptions, 21 pass breakups. He was a reliable tackler in the middle of the field. Now you're adding this to a defense that hopefully will be much more stable going into year 2 underneath Hugh Freeze. And it's a veteran that you know is going to be a plug-and-play starter on the outside and certainly could make a couple of games lean more in your favor, especially if you're able to get the ball in the hands. Even a pass breakup on 3rd and 3 to force a punt and a close call might end up being the difference in a win and a loss in the Plains for Auburn. Florida, Chimere Dike. Most people would probably go to a different position here, cornerback, linebacker, but to me, there's something about having the consistency of a receiver that already knows how to work with a quarterback. Anybody remember where Graham Mertz came from? Wisconsin. Yeah, he was that guy. And he already worked with DK during his time in Madison. DK actually was the #1 receiver for the Badgers when Mertz was the starting quarterback. You got Eugene Wilson. That's a good start. Anybody who looks at this roster going into the year, you feel confident with Eugene Wilson as your #1 wide receiver. But every Batman needs a Robin. Look at the other teams in the SEC, like Ole Miss, like Missouri, like even Alabama and Georgia for that matter. They were a 1-2 punch. This gives you that punch. It doesn't mean DK is going to be the plug-and-play replacement for Ricky Pearsall, but this does at least give you more options outside of Eugene Wilson. Everyone knows 3 is going to be open 10 times out of the bank. You want to be able to create more consistency. You want to be able to create more opportunities. And you want to give a little bit of relevancy to a player like Graham Mertz, who you know needs to utilize the passing attack. This will be a big year for Billy Napier. It's a big year for the Gators in general. Why not add in a player that you can trust, already has a relationship with your quarterback, who actually really impressed down the stretch and maybe even silenced a few critics in the process. Next up, Georgia, the new guy that just came in, Benjamin Yuserick. Anybody know this guy? Probably not. You're not a big Pac-12 fan. If you are, though, you understand why the value of a guy like Yuserick coming in is influential. Georgia likes tight ends. Georgia always likes tight ends. They've liked tight ends for years. And I'm talking about well before you look at the Brock Bowers era. Like Darnell Washington was a major factor in the passing game. Anybody remember the name Isaac Nada? These are players who have all found their wagon in Athens, and they were all qualified tight ends. Dylan Bell filled in and became a plug-and-play initial machine for the Bulldogs this past year in place of Bowers when he was injured. So why not just go back to the fold and do what worked last year? You won 29 consecutive games, and the only reason that you didn't have a three-peat was Alabama had your number on one afternoon. Yuserick does not have the production of what you're looking for in terms of a plug-and-play starter, but you look at his route running, you look at his blocking skills, you look at his hand placement, you look at the physicality after the point of the catch. He is exactly what is needed as a replacement for a guy like Brock Bowers, who's off to the NFL. You lose a 2-time John Mackey Award winner, but maybe you also add in a Mackey Award finalist by the season's end. We all know that a guy like Carson Beck is going to want to target tight ends. Now, instead of having 1, you have 2. And we all know the saying, 2 is better than 1. Next up, Kentucky. It's Brock Vandagriff. They need a quarterback. I was very excited to see what was going to happen with Liam Cohen running the offense, because I look at a guy like Brock and I see a lot of Will Levis to his game. A little bit more athletic, a little bit more mobile, not afraid to stay in the pocket and take a hit, also not afraid to tuck it and run. That's the kind of quarterback that would have worked with Liam Cohen. But now, new offensive coordinator coming in, how does that change up the offense? What are some shakeups? What are some things that are going to differ? I still look at a quarterback like Vandagriff in terms of tools, mechanics, footwork, fluidity, what we've seen in spring football, and he just needs a chance to start. That's really what this came down to. He could sit for another year, maybe try and fight his way up into the starting rotation, or transfer, get the best chance to be able to play, and show that you are just as qualified. People think all the time because of you had to sit behind somebody at a major school that you're not good at your job. That's usually not the case. The reason why they're sitting is because the guy ahead of them is elite and they're pretty damn good themselves. I think Lexington is about to find out what type of quarterback they will have in Vandagriff for the long-term future. He is an immediate upgrade from what you had last season under Devin Leary. Now the question turns to, is he a good fit for the offense now led by Bushman, or is this just going to be kind of a WASP 7-5 finish? Next up, LSU, CJ Daniels. Anybody know what's leaving Baton Rouge this offseason from the #1 passing attack? The passing attack. I'll just stop you right there. The entire passing attack. Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors are all gone. You trust Garrett Nussmeier coming in as your starting quarterback, and we've already done a video talking about what a guy like AJ Swan provides in terms of stability. But Kyron Lacey is really your only wide receiver that you trust. CJ Daniels is coming off of a monumental year with the Flames, where they went undefeated in conference play, where they went undefeated and made it to a New Year's Six Bowl. And he was a big reason why. Him and Caden Salter's relationship was basically like biscuits and gravy. 1,000 yards this past season, led Conference USA in yards after the catch, and was also top 3 in total touchdowns. This is a guy who, if he builds a relationship quite early on with Garrett Nussmeier, with AJ Swan, with whoever is the starting quarterback, that's basically your Brian Thomas Jr. replacement. He can be effective inside the red zone. He's a speed threat down the middle of the field, and he's a vertical presence that can easily take the top off of a secondary, walking it in for a 65-yard score. You want to be able to still have a top 5 scoring offense. You still want to have one of the best passing offenses in college football. You get a plug and play wide receiver like CJ Daniels to replace what you're losing, not only in Brian Thomas Jr., but also Malik Neighbors for veteranship purposes. Next up, Missouri, Caden Green. You may understand, guys, offensive linemen, they're hard to come by. Usually when you're getting a guy, they're going to be a rental option. They'll be here for a year. They want to be able to play for a new conference, go up against higher competition, maybe better their overall draft stock. Caden Green is a freshman. Caden Green last year played every game, whether it be at right tackle, left tackle, guard for Oklahoma, and he was good. There was a little bit of flaws with him, but those are freshman mechanics that are just kind of getting used to the game of college football. You have him for 2 years, and he's versatile. And he can play on either side of the line, and he can play at either guard position. So this creates versatility and more importantly, stability in the offensive line. I don't think many people understand when you add a guy like Green, if he's best at left tackle, that's your left tackle for the next 2 seasons, building off of an 11-2 finish that returns not only your starting quarterback, but also both of your starting wide receivers and your starting tight end. You feel very confident plugging and playing him somewhere on the offensive line. And the good news is those flaws were freshman mistakes. He's only going to get better with time. And so you're talking about a guy who eventually could end up being maybe a first-round talent at tackle, maybe a second-round talent at tackle, an all-SEC name, which is going to stabilize your roster well past the Brady Cook era. I like Caden Green a lot. I think that he could have been a starter for the Sooners this past year. Want to change the scenery, want to get close to home. Home is where the heart lies, and maybe his heart is set on winning an SEC title with the Missouri Tigers for the first time in program history. Next up, Mississippi State, Blake Shapen, Baylor. You need a veteran quarterback. Whenever a new coach comes in, they want to be able to run the offense their way. They want to be able to do things on their terms. And most of the time, that leads to transfers at the most influential position. It's a little bit of a different offense that was run underneath Jeff Grimes in Waco, but the same presence is there. And you got to remember, Shapen was the reason why Baylor won the Big 12 title in 2021. They were consistent. They were moving the ball up and down the ladder. He had the most completions in a row in Big 12 championship history. He was a really stable quarterback when healthy. The injury concerns led to more opportunities for other quarterbacks to get involved and regression setting in. Change of scenery sometimes is the best thing needed. And for a guy like Shapen, who has to have a big year, is a little bit mobile, is consistent when it comes to hitting the middle part of the field, maybe this is what you're looking for in terms of Jeff Levy getting on the right path early. Doesn't mean he's going to be the long-term starter. Doesn't even mean he's going to be the starter for the entire season. But if you can get a guy like Shapen to show a little bit of what he did back in his final few starts with the Baylor Bears in 2021, I think you're turning at least 1 or 2 games from an L into a W. Next up, Ole Miss, Walter Nolan. This was the number 2 defensive player in the transfer portal. This was the number 2 defensive player in the SEC, in my opinion. This is the number 1 transfer that you can want on the defensive line. If you are Ole Miss and you realize what happened last season, 11-2, you got past everybody except for Georgia and Alabama, and the Georgia game wasn't close. You have to build from the trenches. And one thing that Lane Kiffin came out and even said, we have to get better internally. If we want to compete alongside the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, we need to get the quality of player that would go to Alabama and go to Georgia. You're not getting much better than Walter Nolan. Last season, Ole Miss averaged around 4.1 yards allowed per play in run defense. You add in a guy like Nolan, who was exceptional against the run during his 2 seasons at Texas A&M, is coming off of a monumental breakout season in College Station. You're probably turning that 4.0 into 3.3, 3.2. 3.2 forces you to pass on second down. It forces you to have to change at the playbook on third down. It leads to a lot of 3 and outs. And there's been a lot of names added into Ole Miss this offseason. The Portal King went to work. Princely Umanlielen was easily another name and it was an honorable mention. But Walter Nolan, former number 1 defensive recruit, going to Oxford, a place that he knows growing up in the state of Mississippi, it's very hard not to say that Lane Kiffin hit a home run with this one. And this is the reason why everyone should be buying stock in the Rebels going into 2024. Next up, Oklahoma, Deion Burks. Jackson Arnold is going to be the future quarterback for the long term. He's going to be a damn good one. I hate the recency bias whenever it comes out around the time of the bowl eligibility and bowl syndrome, because all of our brains turn to this is what he's going to be. Number one, it was a new offense that he was learning underneath Seth Luttrell. Number two, it was his first major start in college football. He only played a half against one other team in the Big 12 during the regular season. And he now gets a full offseason underneath Brett Venables to know he is QB1. So bring in a wide receiver that is consistently moving the chains. That was what Burke's role was for the Boilermakers last year. Finished with over 755 receiving yards, 7 total touchdowns. He was the number 1 receiver for the Boilermakers. There's reasons for optimism. He's quick, he's shifty, he can get in and out of breaks, good hands, exceptional footwork. This is your new number 1 receiver for Oklahoma. And that might be the difference of you get a win or a loss against teams that you're registered alongside. So many people want to count out Oklahoma going into the SEC. I'm not one of them. I do believe that they can get to 10-2. 10-2 gets you in the college football playoff. Maybe Burks is the reason why we are talking about the Sooners in a much stronger light than we are envisioning right now here in February. South Carolina, Raheem Sanders, Arkansas. I know, I forgot them Arkansas at the very end. But you want to take pressure off of your quarterback. I like Lenoris Sellers. I think that he is going to be a big addition for this team. And more importantly, there was a reason why you didn't watch the Gamecocks go out and add in a proven commodity at quarterback. They realized the kid behind Spencer Rattler was just as good. He just needed a chance to play. So Robbie Ashford now gets to sit, but the best way to take pressure off of Sellers or Ashford in any capacity, have a stable run game. Does this mean anything at the offensive line is still a walking turnstile? Absolutely not. But in the same breath, look at what Sanders could bring to an offense. Physical at every single run. He is a hard-nosed, downfield, in-your-face type of mantra type of player. You know that he is going to get his yards and he's going to feast after contact. Adding him into Columbia, probably a big win. Actually, it's probably one of the biggest wins that Shane Beamer could have gotten this offseason. Tennessee, Lance Hurd. I know. Tennessee fans right now are probably going to be saying, what about the Tulane kid? What about Chris Brazzell? He's a good player. I like Chris Brazzell. I think that he is actually going to end up surpassing Brew McCoy as wide receiver number 1. But goes back to what I said about Missouri. You need offensive line. You're able to get a young up-and-comer who can learn underneath the ropes for what? 5, 6, 7 for what? 3, 4, 5, 3 seasons. Yeah, you're in a really good spot. Hurd, the reason why he left Baton Rouge was not because he wasn't qualified. It was because he wanted to play. He wanted a chance to get on the field, and both tackle spots were currently occupied. So he goes now to Knoxville in an offense that's going to be pass-heavy underneath Nico Iamaleava, in an offense that knows how to cater to offensive line strengths. Darnell Wright last year was a first-round pick by the Chicago Bears, so he's going to get developed by the right people, and now you have him for at least 2 seasons. That's room for growth. That's room for maturation. That's room to believe that this is going to be a kid who by, let's just say, week 7, week 8, maybe is playing at an All-American level. And if you get an All-American offensive lineman added into Rocky Top, the balls are going to be rolling all the way until early November. This is why a lot of people are betting hype and saying that they think Tennessee could be a playoff team. I don't think they are. They can absolutely be a playoff team. And if Hurd hits his stride very early on, those odds are going to go way up. So I would go ahead and hit the money line right now. Next up, Texas A&M, Nick Scourton, Purdue. Whenever you add in a conference's leading pass rusher, automatic win. Automatic win. And what do we know about a guy like Mike Elko, the new head coach of Texas A&M? Defense, and defensive line. Really defensive line more than anything else. A&M, underneath Elko, had the number 2 run defense in 2020 because of their defensive line. In 2021, they had the third lowest scoring defense. They were 3rd in the country, allowing less than 19.2 points per game. That's because of the defensive line. And so Scourton, who is now moving from outside linebacker to defensive end, is going to have an initial step that's going to come in a lot faster. He's going to be a plug-and-play addition alongside proven commodities like Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, and countless others. And he already proved that he could win at any level of the field against offensive linemen in the other conference that is viewed at a higher level than everything else in college football. So Mike Oko gets his hands on a kid who has 2 more years of eligibility, could end up having better numbers in the SEC than he had in the Big Ten, and he gets to be a part of a defensive line that still features 3 returning starters. Yeah, I'm going to say that's pretty influential, and that's going to be a reason why we maybe talk about Texas A&M's defense as a reason the Aggies are sticking around going into the month of November. Next up, Texas, Silas Bolden, Oregon State. Crazy. I went out the deep end with this one. So many people want to go ahead and point to, let's see, Matthew Golden. People want to point to Isaiah Bond, 4th and 31, back of the end zone. Yes, sir. How about Trey Moore, UTSA defensive end, the AAC Player of the Year? Yeah, I went with Silas Bolden because of your losing speed. You're losing speed, and I'm not sure what type of speed is coming in. Yes, Matthew Golden is fast. Is he as fast as Bolden? Yes, Isaiah Bond is coming in. Is he as fast as Bolden? Yes, Jonte Cook is on the roster, and many believe he's Xavier Worthy 2.0, but is he as fast as Bolden? You've watched Bolden out in Corvallis the last few years turn 6-yard gains into 25-yard completions. You've watched him be able to take balls that are on routine passes, on routine routes, and turn them into big-time gains, maybe even touchdowns. And he offers extreme value on special teams. What did Xavier Worthy do? Oh, yeah, just literally that. Be a vertical threat down the field, be effective on special teams, and also add exceedingly amount of talent when it comes to the security blanket for Quinn Ewers. You want to be able to emulate the offense that was run in 2020 when Steve Sarkisian was calling plays in Tuscaloosa. That's your Henry Ruggs right there. That's your guy that can take the tops off of defenses and put fear in defensive coordinators every single play. A 6-yard gain is never a 6-yard gain with Silas Bolden. And I promise you this, you're going to know his name by the season's end if Steve Sarkisian gets things rolling the way he sees fit. Last but certainly not least, Vanderbilt's Diego Paiva from New Mexico State. They need a quarterback. Ken Seals, no longer on the roster. AJ Swan, no longer on the roster. Clark Lee, still very much on the hot seat. Maybe the hottest it's ever been. But Paiva, guy's got starting experience. Whether it comes from Conference USA or not, it's still starting experience. And the win under total for, according to FanDuel, for Vanderbilt is 3.5. You can get to 3.5 wins this year. You look at their schedule with a guy who has proven experience. Paiva can at least hit that marker. And maybe that leads to 5-7. Maybe that leads to 6-6. Maybe that leads to an upset here or there. But a guy like Paiva absolutely coming on into this roster could be the difference of a winless season or a few wins left on the radar. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts. Who was the most influential transfer in the SEC in 2023? Hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss a single episode of SEC Unfiltered. Follow us on social media, Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on social media, at Mr. Cole Thompson. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, at Mr. Cole Thompson. Make sure that you also download the podcast version of the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcast listening systems. And make sure that you're also keeping up to date with everything that we're doing over at SEC Unfiltered at SECUnfiltered.com. Until next time, I'm Cole Thompson. Later, folks.